I'm going to start out on your book.
Oh, man.
Hey, so who are you?
I'm Scott Isaacs. I'm an architect on MSN Web Experience.
And did you really write these DHTML books over here?
Yeah, those books are a little dated now. I wrote them back in, I guess it must have been 96, 97, when we basically developed the DHTML specifications. And I worked with the W3C on all the standards.
So when they say you wrote the book on DHTML, they're actually saying the right thing.
Oh, yes, they are.
I'll be honest, why I'm here. I've been going around Microsoft now and meeting with all these various teams, the Start.com team, the Hotmail team, and every time I do an interview, it seems like your name comes up.
So what took you so long to get here?
So are you really doing all the work at Microsoft? I mean, all the other 50,000 employees are just skating on your work?
Well, as you know, from meeting everyone, you know they're all doing a bunch of great stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a lot of exciting things here back in MSN.
No, so let's start being serious, I guess. You do a lot of, you worked on the Internet Explorer team, right? And you worked on the DHTML spec, and what else did you do? That's enough, right?
What else is there? Yeah, around the early to mid 90s.
Let's see if I can get a better light on
All right.
face.
Not sure that will help me.
Oh, it does.
Back in the early to mid 90s, I worked on the team that did IE4. We basically had a great team of people and came up with Dynamic HTML, which, as you're now seeing, I believe has really changed how we are building websites, albeit 7 years later.
Yeah.
Since
So,
then,
so was your team really the folks who invented AJAX, the stuff called AJAX?
I don't call it AJAX. To me, that was why DHTML was created. DHTML was all about pages that could change in response to basically any stimuli, whether it was the user, data from the server, a timer, who really cares? So the fact that it's called AJAX, the data coming over the wire, we have demos from 97. I'll even show you something from MSN in 99 that was doing it.
Yeah. And so, so you probably, are you miffed by the marketing thing?
I don't get miffed. Actually,
because it's sort of popularized, it made what you did in 97 hip. Yeah.
You know what? That's great. I'm actually a little disappointed it took 7 years to get there. If it takes a new term AJAX, or if they call it foobar, I don't care as long as it's being used.
Yeah.
And it gives us an opportunity now that we're now focusing on building great experiences and doing the right things for the web rather than just throwing websites up for the sake of throwing them up.
Yeah. Now you're from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're building a user interface framework for use on like Hotmail and Start.com and other places. Is that true?
Yes. Basically, we have a framework. I'll show you a few of the sites on MSN that are using it. That I believe goes way beyond the philosophy of what AJAX was. AJAX really was very simplistic. It's about you hit the server, you get some data, it comes back, something updates. That doesn't address any of the real challenges that you need to think about when you build a really rich application. I'll give you a few demos around MSN, and hopefully it'll even illustrate how I believe we're taking the concept of AJAX or DHTML to the next level.
Do you want to do those right now?
Yeah, we could jump right in.
Sure. Because that'll give us some visual context of what you've been working on. Let me get my tripod.
Well, I'm actually going to start well before the stuff I was working on.
Okay.
Back in 99, actually, I think I have to, there it is. Back in 99, I worked on MSN groups. My first stint in MSN, I took 4 years running around the company before I came back. But if I show you over here in groups, the whole concept of, I hit a new message. This is code that I wrote way back in 99. When I open this, you'll notice that I got this little window. If you watch quickly, it's going to say loading. This is basically AJAX back in 99 on MSN. I can show you demos all the way back to 97. So really, as I was saying, none of this is new. It's just finally getting into the mainstream.
Okay.
Now, jumping forward to present day, I'm going to close up this window. And we're going to go over to Hotmail really quick. Hotmail, this is the new Hotmail Kahuna beta. It's actually running off of a private machine, so this is actually more feature-rich than the beta that's out there.
Yeah.
Just to give you an idea, if you watch closely, this URL is never going to change.
Okay. And we'll get up to the top.
Yeah, but as I switch, you'll notice the views keep changing. The entire application here is basically loading and executing on demand. So when I click on an email address, watch how fast it came right up into email to compose. The autocomplete is right there. And even more interesting is, I'm not going to send myself a message. We could do drag drop. I'm going to just drop these in a different folder. And you'll notice it just happens instantaneous.
Now, how do you do that?
This is
This is a web page.
Yes, underneath the hood.
And this works on Firefox and IE.
The Firefox work for Hotmail is coming, but yes, it should work. It's just a matter of testing at this point. But what you're looking at basically is underneath the hoods, and I don't want to drill too deep till I show you a few other demos.
Okay.
We have a system, a framework that allows us to build these really rich interactive components and composite them into larger applications. That's a mouthful. So I think the best thing to do is just show you a few more examples, and then I could drill actually underneath the hoods briefly and to kind of show you how it works.
This would work on a Mac browser?
On the Mac Firefox, it should work.
And it would work on Linux?
Linux Firefox, it should work.
So there's no funky Microsoft-only stuff here? Right?
No, this is all just standard JavaScript code running against the standard XML HTTP object and so on. Jumping back over, I'm going to show you. This is MalaysiaMSN.com. Okay. They're a little more ahead of us on the US one with release, but this release, if you watch, you'll notice it loaded and kind of snapped into place.
Yeah.
This is built conceptually the same way the Hotmail site was built. We have underneath the hoods, there's a framework. It's loading a bunch of modules. I'll just show you when I'm going to search for New York. When I hit go, and we're going to wait. We're talking to Malaysia here, I guess. There we go. We get an inline complete. I'm going to choose New York, and it just shows right up.
And it didn't change the page. The page didn't refresh.
We don't. In all these demos, unless I tell you, we're not going to another page. Again,
how does that work? How do you refresh data just in a piece without refreshing the whole page?
Well, conceptually, this is the first part is the AJAX pattern, which is the concept that we are. When the user does something, we get an event, we basically make an XML HTTP request to our server. The server processes that request and returns a result back to the client within the same context of the same page, and then we process the results. Okay. In Hotmail, which is a very rich interactive application, we actually use a technology that we have called internally FireAN, which is FireAN, which is a approach where we proxy JavaScript calls to the server. So when you have a web service on the back end, it can automatically translate JavaScript structures to C# structures and return them. And when I get back to the client, they're JavaScript structures again. So it's a very natural approach, just exactly how you expect the program. You can basically make an asynchronous method invocation. It goes to the server. Something comes back. You get a call back. But what's more, but that's at the how did the things work? How do we actually talk to the server? Moving on, I was going to show you Spaces real quick, just to show you that it keeps going. When you click on comments, we didn't reload the page. They were loaded in place. We could load them again. We're hitting the server, loading them back. The other thing is, though, this is what I'm saying, going well beyond the concept of AJAX or the concept of server invocation, we're trying to introduce the whole approach of componentization. Okay. So when I hit Add Entry, you'll notice I got a rich text editor. If I went back to Hotmail and I go New Mail, well, it's styled slightly differently. We're using the exact same rich text editor. Really? So what we're trying to do here is build a complete application platform. One of the issues most people don't realize when it comes to a web browser and DHTML is DHTML is basically, the web is still analogous to a single forms package. There's no application infrastructure underneath what we're building.
Now isn't the Office team really nervous about you?
In what way?
You might be putting them out of business here soon, right?
I don't believe so. I think Office has a lot of value. You can leave that for another interview. But
the Office team actually, to be fair, I just got done seeing Office 12, and it's awesome. It doesn't,
Yeah, I haven't seen it, so.
But that's a funny joke, right? The web guys are trying to put the Office guys out of business, right?
Well,
you won't go there.
I'm not going there. But back to what I was saying here is that the whole idea is that we get these componentized systems, so we can start getting leverage and reuse. At this point, I'm going to jump to start.com. Okay. Now, the UI I'm going to show in start.com here, I'm going to use this little Add Start With button. next week, or by the time you view this, it'll be historical, it'll be in the past.
Yep.
We're going to enable anyone to build these type of components that you're seeing. So when you look here, you'll notice that we have integration with Virtual Earth.
Yep.
We built this thing as a standalone component that could basically drop into any one of our applications that use the framework.
Right.
To go even further, I'm just going to show you how much fun I could have. I am loading a URL outside. Oops, if I remember what the URL is. Outside of Microsoft. This is my own personal domain. It has nothing to do with Microsoft, but I needed a place to host it. I'm going to build a neat little widget. Well, ignore security dialog for now. Add to my page. Now imagine this as a little feature. I'm going to drop this to your side. This is kind of a style sheet of what's on the page.
Right. This looks like a CSS style sheet or
Yes,
something?
this is the style sheet applied to start.com.
Okay.
When I hit question mark, flip back to the other screen, it's going to show you what the rules applying to for a brief second. And one of the complaints I know a few people around start.com have had, they didn't like the font we chose.
Why is my focus not working on your monitor? There you go.
Well, I'm going to drop to 8 point, and just to make sure we get a reasonable effect, I'll change the background to light gray. And when I apply this, it turned to light gray. It changes instantly. So one of the things that we're going to do with start.com is start opening it up to let people build. This was built, if you remember, I loaded it from my domain.
Yeah.
So people will be able to extend the start.com experience with their own type of gadgets and their own widgets. Now, we're even going to go further. Unfortunately, I removed it, so I'm going to have to, how am I going to get that back up there? Actually, unfortunately, I removed it. Let's see if I remember the binding. I think this is the one I need. Oh, I typed it wrong. Binding. Now, another interesting thing is, if I could type, let's close that back up and try it. We'll type a little slower this time. Bindings. XML. There we go. Now, you notice that this is a unique experience added to my web page. What's interesting about this Rumor City is this is just an RSS feed. One of the issues, if you think about it, as you move forward, is all RSS feeds are basically treated equally in aggregators.
Yeah.
They all are viewed as a list. Well, when you look at one of our startlets here, we have this horoscope one. That's just an RSS feed, but you know, this is a much more interesting way of viewing the feed than having it listed with...
That's just an RSS feed?
That would just be an RSS feed that we render differently. This is just an RSS feed. I will actually show you the feed. Let me get to the right one. Here's the feed. You'll notice that the only thing we added to the feed, now I know there's a lot of concern about adding things to RSS. I took the keep it simple and stupid approach. I invented a tag that seemed reasonable, stuck it in a document. If anyone has a better tag name, we are going to be totally open to it. This is merely, again, just to get us all running.
Should we get Dave Weiner on the phone right now?
Fine. I will take, if Dave Weiner has a good suggestion, we're trying to do it in a neutral way. We'll specify a framework so there could be different instantiations or approaches that people could choose to use these extensions.
Okay.
But they
Are you documenting these extensions on a wiki or something, or on a page somewhere?
We will talk about them. I'm 4 days ahead of where we were talking about them, but by the time that these are published, yes, we will be talking about them and opening it up.
Are you going to follow the Internet Explorer's team's approach of putting extensions into the Creative Commons?
I spoke to the IE team, and I'm going to follow whatever lead they suggest for how we do RSS extensions.
Okay.
You'll even notice, and I'll drill back in because you'll see where I even got a little carried away with RSS. I'm referencing a file, an XML file.
Yeah.
Now, I have this thing about inventing new schemas, so that's actually the manifest for defining the component. Well, if you look at it, it was just another RSS feed. In this case, I co-opted a little, and I reused the links to point to the resources that made up the definition.
Okay.
So what happened was, jumping back, when this feed was loaded, Start recognized that it referenced this manifest. So rather than rendering it in the default list view, it went through and said, you know, I'm going to go download this manifest, look at the manifest, download the scripts, download the resources, instantiate it. So that whole approach allows you to basically say, you know, if the feed RSS aggregator understands the system, they could get the better experience. If not, it's just an RSS feed. It will render in the traditional way.
Oh, wow.
We actually, what most people don't realize is while we're turning this on next week for third-party developers, this is exactly how Start.com has been running since it was shipped, like basically I think it was early this year around January. Here was the horoscope manifest. I didn't dig up what the URL for the actual feed is, but here's the experience we're providing and the style sheet that's getting associated. Part of this entire system is again, it's a reusable component system.
This is why the Start.com team can be 2 or 3 people and ship a new version every few weeks, right?
Like the blogger map that I'm showing you right here. I wrote this the night Virtual Earth went public.
Yep.
That night I sat down and said, you know, I'm going to build a blogger map component integrating Virtual Earth. I built it, just wrote a manifest, shipped it off to the Start.com guys. They looked at it and said, wow, that's pretty cool. Propped it that morning, and we were done within 2 days. This theme generator, I wrote this last night. You'll notice that this gadget had no coupling to
You're not a normal human being. Okay. How long would it take a normal developer to write this kind of thing? Maybe a few days?
No, well, I'm familiar with the system.
You're a rocket scientist.
I don't believe this is rocket science. And,
okay.
you know, I'm going to go way out. Not to say I had any sort of script here, but I'll show you what Hello World would look like if I can find it. Custom. And actually, it would be simpler because this one was an inheritable. That's what Hello World looks like. Now, I'm just going to warn everyone, if they look too close at this code, next week the code will look a little different at the PDC. So the one people are using, we're simplifying some of these APIs. But anyone who understands JavaScript should be able to build.
Are you going to put all this stuff up on your blog? Or?
I will blog about it, and start.com/developer is going to have all the documentation.
Okay.
But the other thing to think about is, so what the key things to see here is that we're taking this well beyond the traditional patterns of AJAX, which is, all AJAX talked about was, you go to the server, you get data, you do something. Well, there's a lot more that you need to address when you want to build an application. The component model. JavaScript is a very flexible language, but still an immature language. It doesn't have a lot of the object-oriented concepts. We baked in, all written in JavaScript, so that's how it's no extensions. We added full-blown inheritance. We've added enums, flags. We have a network stack. If you go back to Hotmail, here's a really good challenging scenario when you build a rich app. When you're on the web today, when you navigate from one page to another,
yeah.
what most people don't realize is what's happening underneath the hoods in the browser. When you type in a new URL, that previous page was forgotten about. So any outstanding requests were released, the page was basically destroyed, and a new page starts loading. Well, the AJAX pattern is all about you're making all these background requests within the same page. Well, what happens if you are downloading a bunch of emails, and let's say one of those emails have a couple large attachments, and you start downloading those attachments? Well, before AJAX, and the guy left the page, no big deal. Those attachments stop downloading, they hit the new page, and everything keeps running. Well, with these AJAX apps, as we switch views, we got to make sure that we simulate the browser behavior. We got to stop downloading any of those outstanding requests, otherwise we're going to clog the bandwidth. We're going to clog the pipe. So underneath the infrastructure, we have infrastructure for managing the network stack. We could actually prioritize requests. So if you decide a piece of code, an image, or any resource is a low priority, it will not get downloaded until after the high priority ones are done. So a good example there is if we have a bunch of low priority images, like just a bunch of neat little borders that aren't integral to the experience, and the guy hits send mail. Well, send mail is way more important than getting images. We'll stop getting the images, send the mail out, and then continue.
Right.
But the nice part is again, we've built this not as something for Hotmail, not as something for Spaces. This is built as the platform that we are leveraging and reusing across all of MSN. The other interesting thing is, as we point at these components in Start.com, everyone integrates components in MSN in the same way. So in theory, we could start building these interactive pieces, take the rich text editor, and just drop it in any of our properties, all client-side. You just hook up a few little attributes, twiddle a few bits, and you're done. There's no major server infrastructure that needs to be updated and so on. The nice thing is you'll notice that we are opening the Start.com up to third-party developers. So everyone out there, go build some gadgets and basically start having fun. The other nice thing is we've been working with the ASP.NET team. So a lot of what you're seeing here is getting encapsulated into Atlas, which is basically our developer story for building these applications. So none of this is going to be...
Did you help the Atlas team design?
I was meeting with the Atlas team for a few months. The interesting thing is what you're seeing here is a very client-centric approach. we built this thing knowing that we have lots of variations in how we build our backends and so on.
Yep.
ASP.NET is going to provide a bunch of very enhanced and enriched services to help you integrate with. So if you want to do personalization on your website, well, MSN's implementation is designed for a completely different set of scenarios than probably the average developer. But ASP.NET is going to have an infrastructure built in so you could quickly build these components on the client to do the autocomplete text boxes and simply communicate with the backend.
Okay.
But from a component model, from modernizing JavaScript and everything else, we've been working very closely together for the past few months. And actually, Start.com, which is one of the reasons I said the code that I showed you before is going to be different. That's going to be converged, so we're going to be running it on the Atlas code base.
Right.
By the time you're viewing this.
Okay. Now, you threw a lot at me here.
I went all over the map.
So we have Hotmail, we have Start.com. Let's try to compartmentalize it. If I want to build something for Start.com, you're letting me build a cool little gadget or a new kind of RSS aggregator, sort of like what you built over the weekend here. What do I need to do? What do I need to know to get started on that?
All you would need to know is a little bit of JavaScript.
Okay.
We're going to have a documentation that basically gives you that hello world as the framework. Okay. What will happen is if you do the RSS feed approach, where you just extend your feed, when your object gets instantiated, your feed will be handed into your class. So at that point, you have your feed. We have a bunch of helper classes, so you don't have to parse the XML. Actually, you will be handed a parsed version of your XML, a parse tree. So you'll then be able to just quickly spit out the code. I could probably dig it up. I don't want to walk through. I can show you how complex the Rumor City one was. That's all the code for that Rumor City.
Okay.
It's a screen and a half. So the experience, and
you're giving me this code?
This code will be on, actually Rumor City, just so you know, is a website, nothing to do with Microsoft. It's run by our hum of Spaces, built it as a hobby. So what's even nicer about the way this is built, you could, in theory, if someone built a really cool experience for their feed, you could reference their experience and have your feed applied to it. So it's a completely distributed model. If someone built their class to be inheritable, to be allowed to be a base class, you could actually derive from someone else's experience, and it's a completely distributed approach. It will load your manifest and the scripts that you define, then go out to the web and get the other person's, and you can basically composite up any rich experience you want from anyone else's components that already exist.
Very cool.
So I expect that in the first few weeks, you'll see little dabblings like the scrolling list, but one of the things
now, can I mash up Start.com with other services? Can I go to Amazon's web service, for instance, and pull in stuff?
There are some
eBay's web service, or
there's some challenges because of the cross-domain issues of making requests across, but we proxy the RSS, the XML requests on your behalf. So if you're just pulling in any XML feed, you just reference it, and we will automatically make sure it gets handed back to you.
Okay.
You go through the network stack. The other thing,
can I pull in stuff from web services either through SOAP or Rust, or does that? Do I even have any concept of that in this?
Today we're still figuring it out. The real challenge here is, people will notice next week, it's a security challenge. If you really, all this code is running in the context of Start.com. So you got to make sure that if you load someone's service that you feel it's safe. The browser will not let you communicate outside of the domain of Start.com. So we're still working out on how we want to do the proxying. For the first round, we'll proxy simple XML requests so you could get RSS feeds, different sort of XML data. How we want to handle general arbitrary like posts to an XML, a different server. We're still figuring that out. We got to make sure we do it in a sane way because of scaling issues. I mean, it's very easy for you to start pounding our servers and we're proxying everything.
Yeah.
To give you another idea of how flexible this gets, I'm going to show you, this is an old version of Start that I have running on my machine. But since you mentioned Dave Weiner before, I know Dave Weiner does not believe that this is the appropriate view for any RSS aggregator.
Yeah.
It would be relatively trivial for someone to build, and you'll notice I'm loading this again from my domain out in the real world, a river of news. Now this river of news worked by communicating with all the other, it basically said, whenever there's an RSS feed on the page, tell me about it, I'm going to resort it and display it as a river of news. So the other thing people will be able to do when they build these gadgets is communicate and interact with the rest of the experience.
Right.
So literally, if someone really wanted to get carried away, they could re-engineer the entire Start.com experience with their own little gadget and rearrange everything on the screen. It's completely completely an open book now.
Wow. Can I take stuff from the website and spit it to my local drive, or?
We don't have an offline story for Start.com. We are working on a sidebar strategy where these gadgets will actually be able to be pulled out of Start.com and dropped into your sidebar. All this hopefully will have been visible at the PDC when this is
I'm interviewing Sean Alexander.
Oh, perfect. That's why you brought it up. Good.
Yeah.
You're a good leading question without giving
I didn't even think about the sidebar, but I was. But I'm just trying to figure out where the walls are here.
Yeah, the nice thing is as we've been saying, these are gadgets. That's what we're calling them. These gadgets are end-to-end. On the web, this is a nice roaming experience. You could go to start.com on any machine, log in, you get the gadgets on inside the context of the browser. You go home to your desktop, these could be on your desktop as part of the sidebar.
Yeah.
So the story basically translates very well.
Can I get to the service from a WinForms app or a Windows Presentation Foundation app, an Avalon app?
These are DHTML components.
Okay.
But I do know, and you're talking to Sean and them tomorrow, it sounds like they'll explain more how all that plays into the sidebar.
Okay.
But right now, this is a web-based technology and a web-based approach.
Very cool. Anything else we need to know about this?
Other than start building and keep looking for the great things that are going to come in the future.
Yeah.
But the big thing is as I mentioned, we did come up with extensions to RSS. Please don't look at them and flame us. Provide constructive feedback.
We're going to flame you.
I'm asking nicely, but just keep
This is the internet, man.
Keep in mind that we took I'll use the term that I know that's been around a while, KISS, keep it simple and stupid. I didn't want to invent schemas. I just made it work as fast as I possibly can. Yeah. We wanted to basically get the feedback. The same idea, the whole idea of building these Start.com gadgets is a preview so we could learn from the developer community. But we believe this allows us to do great things.
Now, since you're the guy who actually built the technology underneath this, do you have suggestions for developers who are trying to build, these modern kinds of what do you call these things? Web applications?
I call
Other people call them AJAX pages.
I just call them websites, but websites.
But it doesn't look like my website in 1994.
Well, it's kind of sad that we still look a lot like 94. The real challenge when you start looking at these applications is understanding that you are in a web browser. I have a lot of answers. I could go on for a long time on how to solve a lot of problems, but the explanations are easier said than put into practice. A simple example is navigation, history, back buttons, and so on. Earlier I made the comment, the browser is really a forms package. It's not an applications package. We're layering application frameworks and infrastructure on basically what I would say is analogous to imagine building a VB application with one form. Yep. You only had access to one form. So we're basically sliding things on and off the screen continually. So think about when you build this, how do you do this in a way to maintain as much as possible the traditional web look and feel? I know a lot of this is brought up by a lot of people. How do you provide proper feedback? The user clicks on something, the little E or whatever it is in the different browser doesn't spin because it's behind the scenes. How do they know something's happening? Another problem is how do you know that you did what you needed to do before they left? Imagine the guy hits send mail and this is an asynchronous request, the guy leaves the page. Well, we don't want them to leave the page so we know the mail actually went out. Yeah. So there's a bunch of challenges in there. The last one, which is a real big one, is accessibility. As we build these applications, how do we make sure that they are still accessible? How do you make
a screen reader like JAWS,
yes.
Somebody who's blind can still look at the page.
We're working closely with people to make sure that we're accessible. I'll admit while we understand that we believe we have understanding of how to solve the problem, we're still a long way from getting it right. Yeah. Then the last thing, which is something that I didn't really hit much on this, and I would like to bring it up even though it's not so much answers. When you start looking at a lot of what we're building, another real challenge is when you build what I call a closed app. Imagine Virtual Earth by itself is what I call a closed application. The experience is fixed. It has everything it needs to know to run. Take Start.com, which is what I call more of an open-ended application. Yeah. There could be 1,000 components out. I would hope there's thousands of gadgets at some point. there's no way you could build a website that's going to download all the code for thousands of gadgets. So the way we're building everything is that's why we have these manifests. That's why we're building it in this way, is that the app can dynamically grow as the user is using it. When we added those gadgets to the page, we downloaded the manifest. We downloaded the resources that got instantiated. Trying to understand how you build an application that maintains those that can respond in that way is actually quite a challenge. And that's what we're trying to do again with what we did in the MSN framework, which I would argue now is basically the Atlas framework, because we're all converging.
Yeah.
And when you start building your own applications, it's the certain things to start thinking about.
Now, isn't this an internet operating system?
You could call it that. It's kind of like a web-based. It's basically an internet. It's the network platform. It's the vision everyone said for years is what's the platform? I don't call it the web browser. I don't call it the server. It's basically the web as a platform for how you build and integrate these things.
Yeah. Are you writing another book?
I've been asked to. Instead, I've been writing up a bunch of little memos on my blog. Might as well give my blog a push.
Yep.
Spaces and go to www.weblogging.com and it'll have a link to my blog from there.
Very cool.
But I've been writing them up on my blog. The problem is anyone who's written a book will tell you.
It's a thankless task.
Beyond that,
yeah.
when you think you're done, you're only about 10% done.
Yeah.
And the last 90% will kill you. And I would rather invest my efforts educating people via short articles and so on than spending the 9 months writing a book, which in theory should be obsolete when I'm done. But since we're 7 years later and we're still using it, I don't know.
Yeah. Anything else cool to talk about from your point of view? You're building so much of the infrastructure for the next MSN.
Yeah, it's really just the whole idea that we're finally understanding the value of how we can build these, putting modern engineering into the client, getting rid of the ad hoc scripting.
Yeah.
What
are you looking forward to in Windows Vista? Have you been playing with that at all?
With Windows Vista, I haven't looked too much at it. I've been 2 heads down right now.
Yeah.
Just getting everyone in MSN running, making sure we get this out the door at the PDC and so on.
Yeah, and you have to make sure you support old Macs and old Windows machines, and so you don't get to play with the fun new stuff, do you?
I'm sure I will soon.
Well, thanks for spending some time with us, and looking forward to seeing the new Hotmail. We interviewed that team, so we'll have that video coming up shortly, and Start.com team, I think we're going to see at the PDC next week.
Yes, and I'll be there too. So.
Yay. Thank you very much.
Welcome.